Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Welcome. I see those numbers climbing up on the participants. We're glad you are here with us this morning. Welcome. Welcome. For those of you who have been with us before, you will note that I don't have a Zoom background today. And I'm actually at the Center for Leadership office, and we're excited to be slowly repopulating the campus here. I've got our fantastic lead award in the background, one of the awards that we've been fortunate enough to win at the Center for Leadership. Over the years, that was an award sponsored by HR.com for our leadership development programs. And you can see the campus in the background. I am thrilled to have with us two fantastic guests today and friends of the center. I will call them both. They're both have been familiar with the center for quite a while, and I'll introduce them here in just a second here as people are coming in. But welcome again. Marilyn, hi, good morning. I see Michelle, a blast from the past. Someone, Leon Gomez, says, hi, it's been a while. I'm looking forward to seeing you. Anyway, so people have found out about this near, far, and wide. Good morning, George. Good morning, Horace. Good morning, Kristen. So as people sort of come in, we are going to get started. Good morning, Bianca. Thanks for being here today. So our two fantastic guests with us today are Michelle Abbs and Peter Montadas, and I'll let them sort of introduce a little bit, or they can talk a little bit about their story, but I'll kind of do a brief introduction of both of them. So I'll start with Michelle. Michelle, we have known at the center for a number of years. Michelle has a really interesting background, and I think it'll be great to get into sort of how she is where she is now. But she is an award-winning leader, and what I mean when I say that is that she is the recipient of an Emerging Leader Award that the Center for Leadership gives out every year, which, by the way, we will be announcing next week, the 2020 winner. So look for that. Michelle was a participant in the Miami Fellows program, which is a group of fantastic elite leaders who are making a difference in the Miami community that is sponsored by the Miami Foundation, who we also work with, and has had some really interesting roles. Most recently, before her current role, she was the director of the WIN Lab, which is Babson College's outpost in Miami that is working in startup and new venture tech space. And she can tell us a little bit about that before her current role. We also have Peter Montadas, we looked this up this morning, Peter, just to be sure how long Peter has been on the board of advisors at the Center for Leadership. We have a fantastic external board of advisors at the Center for Leadership. Peter, so I don't know if you have any guess, but it's 10 years. You have been on the board for 10 years. Peter also a number of years, actually I think probably about a year before that, attended our C-level, our program that we run for CEOs. It was a fantastic group of people we had at that time. He is the co-founder of Momentum Consulting, and they really work to help organizations, a lot of organizations that you have all heard of, and he might talk a little bit about a few of them today, help them transform the work that they do around security, digital transformation. Is a whole bunch of teams. You have 140 employees. Is that 140, 150 employees right now?
150.
Great. Well, welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Great. So maybe, and Beth from sunny South Africa, I love it. Welcome. We're glad that you are here. I'm curious to know, where are you located in South Africa? And good morning, Jennifer and Shanila and Rosa. Awesome. Great. We're glad that you're here. So Michelle and Peter, maybe you can just give us a brief outline of how did you end up here today? You know, what's your journey been? And we can get into some specifics, just kind of high level. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. Go ahead, Michelle, if you want to go
Sure.
first.
Okay, great. And I'm a little bit jealous of sunny South Africa, given our rain showers in the background here. Part of why I am here is the sun, right? I grew up in Michigan, and moved to Miami after college. I was an educator. I came in through Teach for America. You know, really felt a drive to choose a career path that was going to give back and do some good in this world. I enjoyed, you know, teaching and felt a real passion for closing the achievement gap. And so stayed in education for a while, worked with Teach for America, and then saw this gap in technology and education. And so I transitioned to work for a startup here in ed tech in Miami, and loved that as well. And then said, how can I marry this passion for sort of education and, you know, technology? And so I began the role that you mentioned with Babson College, and ran our accelerator for female founders. So we did 3 cohorts of that with 20 female founders in each group. So it was incredibly inspiring, and really saw a community come around and evangelize around how do we, you know, see equal representation in startups, you know, between both genders. So that sort of community building and vision inspiration piece transitioned into my current role. So now I am the director with Montatus. I work with Moishe Mana, the real estate developer, in realizing his vision for downtown in the Flagler district, and, you know, really convening the tech and entrepreneurial community into that physical location of the real estate there. So part of, you know, there's a thread there that, you know, goes through all of it, but also a little bit of a circuitous route to lead me to where I am today.
Yeah, it's fantastic, right? So, and for those of you who know a little bit about Miami, or regardless of whether you're familiar, there's really sort of a fundamental transformation occurring in a variety of areas related to sort of downtown Wynwood and that area, and the company you work for, the founder of that really is so you're involved in one of the critical aspects of that, of like building this mini city, right? I think we can get into this a little bit more. That is like a tech hub space. I mean, that sort of marries living and working and all this it's modeled. So I look forward to kind of hearing a little bit about that. So just to cue people, yeah, sometimes it doesn't come through how cool this project is, and I look forward to hearing a little bit more about that. So Peter, tell us just briefly a little bit about yourself. How did you end up here today, besides me twisting your arm? No, it wasn't much of a twist. Thank you.
So thank you, Nathan, and thank you everybody that's on the call. So so it's interesting. I you know, you kind of prepped us before for this question, so I've been thinking about it a lot. Like, so and I guess the best analogy that I can give you is I have a really close friend of mine, and his son wanted to be a pilot, and ever since he was like 10, 11 years old, he had built a special console for him, and he was doing all the flat navigator games and all that stuff. And today he's a commercial pilot, but that's what he always wanted to be. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to be. So when I started, you know, I started in and wound up in electrical engineering at the University of Miami. I started actually as a pre-med and pre-dental, switched over to electrical. So it's one of those, like, you know, for those of you that get into college and then switch careers, it happens. So so I finished, when I started doing electrical engineering, I realized that I like computers and tech. So I concentrated on computer engineering. Then one thing led to another, and I wasn't expecting it. Again, kind of life takes you certain turns. I wound up working in Washington, D.C., which wasn't my plan. Almost all the engineers that were graduating from were going straight to Florida Power and Light or Southern Bell at the time. They had the tech jobs down here, and that's what I thought I was always going to be down here, but I wasn't able to get one, so that's where I landed. Once I was there, I wanted to get back to Miami, so I talked to really good friends of mine. They said, "Listen, for you to get back to Miami, you better get an MBA, and then you can work in consulting." So I went and I targeted getting an MBA and the major in information systems. And then I wound up getting a job with Deloitte, moving back to Miami. And by that time, I knew I wanted to do consulting. So it was kind of like I knew my time horizon, but just the next step, right? The next step or two. It wasn't like I had a 10-step plan from day one. And so when I got into consulting, I thought, well, I'm going to get to work in these great corporations, and then I'm going to land as an employee in one of these corporations. I'm going to pick the one that I like the most, right? So I did that for several years. I worked at both Deloitte, and then I went to a spinoff of Anderson Consulting for several years, and then I started off and did my own thing because there was just an indication that there would be a lot of travel going on, and I didn't want to travel. So then one thing led to another. I got my great business partner that I met in 2000, and we've been created Momentum in 2002, and I've been doing it ever since. And then what I found out early in consulting is, look, I love these companies, but I don't want to be locked into a company. I really like going to different companies and looking at what they're doing, the business processes, the people, and not getting locked into the politics and things like that. So I really enjoyed that. It kept me learning and cutting edge and things like that. So that's why I did what I did. But it wasn't this master plan when I was 10 years old. Hey, I want to have my own consulting company. I want to do this when I grow up. It wasn't kind of like that. It was the opportunities presented and the twists of life and adapting to it and setting shorter term goals within the context of what you have going on.
Yeah, so that's fascinating. If we sort of look at the trajectory of sort of both of your careers, and so we had a call a few weeks ago for those. We always plan for these, and then just as we were looking at the questions that you all as the audience and participants submitted. So thank you, by the way, for those, and feel free to chime in on the chat as sort of we go through. But one of the questions that we got ahead of time was, or a part of it I'm going to pick on was, so how did you sort of turn your dream into a reality? And it cued us sort of thinking about, what that looks like. Because I think, in some ways we have this sort of romanticized vision that for people who are doing great, inspiring things, they've had this vision in their brain of where they want to go and what this is going to look like for a long period of time. And so we think of, Elon Musk or Steve Jobs. We sort of have this idea of like, or people who, say, well, I know I've always wanted to be a physician or a police officer or whatever it is. I sort of have this theory. And not just a theory, but I think that's dangerous thinking to feel like everyone needs to have that. Right? Is that it's limiting. And if I sort of look at the trajectory of your careers, do you sort of have any thoughts on this? I can also say the same, that for me, it's what I'm doing now wasn't a vision that I had 20 years ago. So maybe you can just sort of talk to us. What does that look like? At some point, you maybe had a vision of where you wanted to be in the next short or medium term and putting that into reality. But did it look like, Michelle, you started out as a teacher, right? And Teach for America. And now you're talking with Google and, and being a sort of a liaison between tech companies, trying to figure out what they need to attract them here and what that looks like in building a space. What does that have to do with teaching?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a bit of a dangerous, as you stated, sort of fallacy about you have to have this sort of linear career path and there's this destination of where you will arrive and then you're done. And I think that, oftentimes we do see folks who jump a little bit and explore things, especially, in our generation. I think that I was clear on sort of like a North Star of what I wanted to do with my life. I knew that I wanted to do something that felt like it was going to make an impact. I had a professor in college, I remember, who told me, whatever you do, you're going to work really hard in whatever job you choose. The question is, what do you want to work hard for? And I wanted to work hard for something that showed a bottom line that improved this world in some way. So the sort of undergirding theme of each role that I've chosen is that, right? So what does it look like to completely sort of redefine downtown Miami and help us thrive as a tech and entrepreneurial hub, that feels like, wow, like that's an incredible impact that we could make. And, same with the previous roles, but it definitely is not linear. And I have to say, not everyone is always as open to, not as linear of a path. I have been in interviews before where people will say, why did you go from here to here? Why were you only there for 2 years? And oftentimes the answer was, well, maybe that wasn't matching with my personal North Star. And I didn't feel like I was making the impact that I could. And so I wanted to go find something else. But I know that, previous generations, the way that the approach was, you choose one career, you sort of move up the ladder, and that's that. And so I think that having this question actually opens up the opportunity to explore the asset in having multiple experiences with maybe a common personal call or personal why statement around each of those roles.
So yeah, so they're not disconnected, right? I mean, there's a thread, there's some connection sort of between them, but it's not a linear path of what you would typically think. And I mean, and if I cue on what Peter was saying too about this sort of idea that you like, you do tech consulting. Yeah, it's a broad term, but there's a lot of different angles to this, and you're in a lot of different types of organizations. So like maybe we're just the type of people who get bored easily. I don't know, what does that say? What do you think, Peter?
Again, I think it's something that you touched upon earlier. Different people are different, so it's not that it's wrong to be a kid and know that you want to be a doctor. I know a lot of doctors that's how it was, right? But not everybody is the same, and different people, they mature differently, they have different interests, and I like the analogy Michelle used about the North Star. And yes, my North Star was tech. I knew I liked tech, STEM, tech. I need to go in that direction. I definitely didn't want to be a writer of a book or something. So I went in that direction as a general direction. However, the experiences of life and the opportunities that are presented to you are the things that then you have to evaluate which door do you go through that's in front of you if you don't have it, right there. So you have to do things in steps. You have to do, what's the next step that I have to do to get to the direction that I think I'm going in. And when I started working at Deloitte and then the other company, I never thought I was going to do my own thing. It just wasn't on my radar. I either was going to stay with them all my life because I liked that role, or I was going to wind up working at a company. And then just circumstances created a situation that I had to make a decision. And that's when I started my own company.
It's interesting. So I'm seeing. I thank you for those who have put some. I typed a question, sort of saying, what about you all, the attendees? Have you are you doing what you're doing now? Is it the same as what you thought you would be doing, or did you sort of have this grand vision? And I think what the responses show is that sort of two people are saying yes. Someone else, Margarita, says, well, I sort of had this idea and I knew it would take a while and many steps to sort of get there. But I think there's something freeing about this for people especially people who are maybe younger and are trying to figure out, because people love to ask you what you want to do. And I think not having that answer can be a source of significant anxiety for, sort of put this pressure on ourselves that we kind of have to know. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't necessarily have any idea, but don't feel bad if you don't know what that looks like. I mean, so sometimes, the way that I frame it is, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I mean, because I think there's, and I think I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, but there's this piece of being adaptive and being nimble and being okay with that it doesn't somehow mean that you are sort of less effective. I think very few of us, I think, are blessed with this grand vision, and for most of us, they change. So just as something, I want to push back on that sort of general narrative here, because I think this is a great example of there's something about tech here. And I mean, Michelle, I don't know, we could think of a couple different themes probably, right? So that have sort of, one thing leads to another. I love it. But thank you both for sharing that. So Peter, what was the moment that you said, okay, now I'm going to jump out on my own?
So it was kind of factors that led me to be uncomfortable where I was, a combination of who I was, my direct line manager was at the time, and also the view that the company I was working for was going to start doing a lot of traveling. So kind of in a way, the essence of that company was changing, the DNA was changing, and I knew that I wanted at that point. I said, no, I want to do this. I love consulting at this point. I know that. I love South Florida. There's a lot of companies here. I want to develop relationships here. And I want people that don't want to travel all the time. And that was, several people, like when you were in consulting, either in Deloitte or Accenture, I mean, you were on the road a lot. One of the reasons I left Accenture is they were going to stick me on a project in Madison, Wisconsin for 2 years. And I was like, no, I'm done. I'm out. Right. So that's kind of why I switched. So those were the things, just knowing that was going to happen. And I wanted to have our, our own culture, our own DNA of a certain way of conducting business, a certain, value set, and I wanted to be comfortable in that. And thank God I've been able to do that with my great business partner that
That's fantastic. So I want to shift gears a little bit and ask a question. Is work from home working? In what ways does it work? I mean, where are you at right now? And with that thought, Peter, you want to take that first?
So I have a lot of thoughts on this because I've been analyzing this and discussing this with my clients, right? So this is a very unique and different time, and it's also a time that's changing and will continue to change and will land someplace else, sometime soon. Hopefully within the next 3 to 6 months, we should be in something that will change, and basically that would be something like a vaccine or just better therapeutics that we're comfortable that, okay, it's time to get out more freely. So there were studies done and companies that had remote working many years ago, and then they did productivity analysis and found that was not that great and started pulling that back in. So the fact that this is working right now is because we're all in the same place, right? Everybody's working from home, so everybody is on the Zoom calls. Furthermore, because of the anxiety, everybody's working very focused and very hard. And there is actually a lot of productivity, at least on the IT side, because it's not one of those businesses that you have to be like the restaurant industry. You have to be there physically, kind of thing. So productivity is very high in IT. By the way, IT is very hot. There's a lot of demand. It's hard for us to get people. Our people are in demand. So that has not tapered off as a sector as much. But I think it'll change, and I think productivity does change if you're only working at home. And there's certain dynamics that happen between people. The reason that we have office buildings and meeting rooms and things like that is that people are more effective in groups and getting together live, and the social interaction is super important to developing bonds and relationships and things that help you move forward in work besides business, right? Besides just the work, it's just an important aspect, I think, and fabric of our culture. So I think things like Zoom and Microsoft Teams, they're here to stay, and they are definitely a wonderful and incredible augmentation of how you work. But I don't think that this is the new norm. Like people say, oh, now everybody's going to work from home. Yeah, you can get away with that right now. But when things return back to normal and you have 10 people in a room and 2 people are never there, that creates tension, because, hey, how come they could get to work at home all the time in their pajamas and I have to drive into work every day? You don't want that. It's got to be team chemistry. Everybody's got to be on the same page. So I think that's how I see what's going on now versus what's going to happen next.
Yeah. At first it was like work from home. You see these articles, are we ever going to go back to the office? And I was like, yes, because we're going to find out this doesn't work. I mean, it works for some people. Well, it worked and we're going to make it work. But like, there are real costs that we're ignoring right now that are going to start showing up. Right. And so, Michelle, how do you see that? You're sort of in a unique position where I guess you would be otherwise. What would you be doing if we weren't in lockdown in terms of your job? How has this shaped what you do differently?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would be probably doing much of the same thing in an office, and a lot more of the meetings that I'm having via Zoom would be over lunch, in person, with folks, having them to the offices to actually show the spaces, and what we're building, and inspire folks. So actually, when I first started, I was like, you know what, there's not that much different, but truly there is. It would be, I think, a lot easier to, help folks realize the sort of grand vision that we have to walk around downtown together, and to be in a space and show them, the design plans for what we're doing, and that's not an option right now. But a lot of the sort of tasks that I'm doing would be done in an office building, and now they're just done at home. So that part feels somewhat similar. But I think the question of, is it working? There's some really conflicting data that concerns me about who it might be working for and who it's making things a lot harder for. I think when they do data sets and they cut for gender, and especially mothers seem to be finding this even more challenging. And I know, when this first started, folks are like, wow, you're really in the commercial real estate game. People aren't going to want to go back to the office. And what I was
Someone just asked a question about that a few minutes ago. Okay, so go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but what I was hearing from parents specifically is, this is not, feasible. I don't personally have kids, but I could imagine if I was on the Zoom, if I had a kid right now and they might be knocking on the door, we're on the Zoom call, like, what does that look like to manage all of that? And the additional sort of workload that occurs in the home, then there is no sort of separation between those things. And I think that can be challenging, especially, it seems like some of the data is pointing to that being even more challenging for women, and that concerns me.
Yeah, and I think tell me if this is sort of what you've seen, what I have seen on this. I mean, and this has been shown now for a couple decades still, that even though there is more sort of gender equality and women are in more roles, that still the bulk of child rearing activities and home activities, a significant portion of it, it's not evenly distributed, right? And so when now you have a massive increase in the extent to which a kid is at school virtually and needs, or if they're younger and they need, like, that is generally more likely to involve more of women's time. And so, what I've been seeing is that there's some significant concern that this is working great for men and not so much for women, particularly those who have younger kids. Because, if I think of my sister-in-law, she's a teacher, and now it's, she's spending most of her day supervising her 3 kids remotely. I mean, she's like, this is a full-time job. And so, she wasn't currently wasn't working full time. And so, it was able to work for them, but this becomes really sort of exhausting. And so from the trajectory, someone asked about, does this work better for different ages? I mean, so the answer might be yes, but I mean, one of the things we know too, over time, I mean, how do you onboard people, right? How do you have those? And Peter was saying, I know before, about water cooler conversations. You can plan a Zoom conversation, but you don't have those serendipitous conversations where you learn valuable information that you wouldn't have predicted that you needed to know, because you're not having those sort of natural conversations. And so you can plan a Zoom conversation when you know you need to have a conversation, but many times at work, the value in these conversations is having conversations we didn't know we needed to know we had, because we don't know what we don't know, right? And the other thing is that if you have differential people kind of coming back in, it's a lot harder. If you are working remotely and the rest of your team is in, your chances for promotion, and the odds that you're going to get laid off in a layoff go way up and way down, or way down and way up, right? So your chance of promotion go way down, your odds of getting laid off in a layoff go way up, because it's harder. You have to engage in a lot more of that connection, because much of work is around some of these sort of human connections. And there is this implicit belief, this is going to be a challenge, right? Is that when some people go back and some people don't, the presumption is that when they're out of sight, if you don't see them working, they must not be working, right? And so this is this like dogged thing, this thing that just keeps showing up, that actually time in office is predictive of a lot of stuff, right? And so if you're not there, it makes it harder. It doesn't mean you can't be successful, right? So I'm not trying to say, but I think it sort of it makes it more challenging. And so it'll be interesting to see, like, is this, these tools we have now are a lot better, right? So and Peter, you're seeing this. I can imagine if this was 15 years ago, what the state of our sort of economy would have been, what this would have looked like, because we just didn't have these tools, they weren't available.
So,
Yeah. Nathan, it's reminding me of something you had said a couple weeks ago, which was around, productivity. And it's like, we're working, but we're working on what, right? So I wonder how much of the productivity that we're measuring is that just work for work's sake, to say, I'm putting in hours, I'm doing things, versus I'm doing real, maybe strategic, creative thinking around things. And I wonder what the difference is from sort of April, May to now. As I don't know if that has shifted, Peter, for you as well, Nathan, but for me, that was very different in April and May. It was like, okay, this is a short timeline. I went out to the store, I bought a dry erase board, put it behind me. Okay, I'm going to work on this for a couple months and then we're going to go back. And now I think we're all in a mindset of, okay, this might be a while. We're not really sure when this ends. And so I wonder how much, first question, like productivity, what are we working on? And then second, how much that changed, because, when there seems like there's light at the end of the tunnel for those more serendipitous human interaction versus when there's not, and it's, unclear, I think that also impacts productivity.
I agree. Just one point I do want to make it that you mentioned, Nathan, was, what would have happened many years ago. And I've been around for a long time, and I do remember, when the dot-com crash happened and September 11th, that I was of the mindset, hey, like no matter what, people still need tech, and they're going to continue it, and it wasn't the case. And there was money pulled back. Well, that's not the case this time, and everybody realizes how important it is. In fact, I don't think, and it's also because many of my clients are very they're Fortune 500 companies. They have great CIOs that have a great vision, and most of them were prepared, and it made an easy transition to have everybody that was working at work to just go to the house. I mean, not only that, the whole United States went from, in no time, from working at a working in indoors to working away. That changed everything, the infrastructure, the telecom, the security. So and they didn't miss a beat. And I don't think IT got enough credit for that in general, right? And if it would worked, you would have had the entire companies that would have just said, hey, I got to shut the doors because everything I have is manual. I can't communicate with anybody. I got to function. Right. So
Yeah, if you didn't have the cloud and if you didn't have ways for people to get in, I can't, it's it's sort of how this will be remembered in sort of a historical context. You've got to wonder wow, yeah, this would have looked totally different. What about so some of the startups you were working with, Michelle, what are they, can you maybe sort of what are they doing now, but like what were some of the things you learned in working with 20, so you said 22, right?
20 in each cohort. So yeah,
20 in each cohort, so 60. What was that like? What sort of lessons did you learn along the way? And then I want to ask the same for Peter. And so it could be around that you saw or that you learned, and then also the same for Peter. I mean, what are some of the things you've learned about leading and or just kind of staying the course or whatever? I'm gonna make it a very broad question.
Gosh, there's so many ways to take that.
Yeah, feel free to take however you want.
Yeah, I do think that there is something different in sort of the DNA of really great founders and entrepreneurs. There is an incredible grittiness and commitment to ride out the adversity and stay the course. So there's like a sort of staunch commitment to the end line, but a flexibility in the middle of like how you get there, because each sort of challenge that presents itself made the really great entrepreneurs change course when they needed to. And, there's also those moments where you might be hearing some advice that tells you to change course, but you in your gut as the founder know, actually, no, that's the wrong advice because they don't have the full picture. So overall, I did see that trend in the ones who are still, very successful today. And I think that this COVID has also, been a really interesting experience for all of them, I'm sure. But the ones I think who have made something happen and saw this as an opportunity were able to get really creative and think about, and sort of tech and startups, we talk about product market fit. And so when COVID happened, there's a complete shift in what product market fit is. And folks who took an account of what the current reality was, but a long-term view at the same time, right? So not searching for COVID market fit, and like this short term, what we might need, but long term, how is this going to look completely different? I mean, we go to the airport now and it looks completely different because of 9/11, right? COVID will mark our society in the same way. And so the entrepreneurs, I think, that are thinking about it like that, are seeing really interesting success points. One of them being this app called Caribou, which allows parents and grandparents to read and interact with their kids from long distances. So, talk about kids being sort of entertained and consumed with something that's also, educational for them. They can be on a Caribou call with their grandma who maybe can't fly to see them at the moment. And so Max, who's the CEO of Caribou, has really taken this moment and used it to propel her forward.
Great.
And some Caribou fans, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Peter, yeah, so take this
Yeah.
question any way you want.
Yeah. So a couple of different things, right? So when you're leading, right, you're piloting a ship, you're the captain and the captains, and you're piloting the ship in a storm, right? And business is always like that because things change and you have to adapt and overcome and move through it. So really things that were happening at the very beginning, like Michelle said, are very different than are happening now. So at the very beginning, for us, we would have clients that would say, hey, everybody you have here has got to go home, left and right. And so you're dealing with, okay, what are we going to do? How do we have let's look at our finances. So we were doing financial analysis and slicing and dicing ad nauseum. We would have daily stand-ups to do things to kind of understand what the impact of this scenario was and that scenario was. And it's not something that you would do normally when you're doing normal operations. You have your model works, and if there's some variations to it, you know what to expect. But this was totally, we had to transform what we were doing in order to manage the situation until we got to a stabilizing point. And then you start to do different things again. But yes, what we were doing at the beginning was very, very different than as we're doing now. Even adapting to meeting your clients. I mean, you have to do virtual happy hours and things like that. You can't do an event, where you have 4 or 5 clients, all together, sometimes in a single location, even though that's getting better right now.
How can we, I know you have some sort of thoughts on this. What does leading look like differently now in this sort of like, what are the things that you're thinking about, Peter, as you lead really a whole organization? What are the things you're trying to focus on or do differently?
So your core values have to be the same always, right? I think what's changed is communication. So kind of internally, the executive team and the management team is talking to each other all the time and doing things, but sometimes you don't get to the field. So you do have to kind of put, in our case, right? Every company is different. In our case, we did have to put out communications to let people know, hey, we got this under control. We know we've gone through, September 11th, the dot-com crash, the recession of 2008. We know how to navigate this ship in a storm. We're going to get through this, right? And let everybody know that we've been through things like this before. Kind of the grit that Michelle was talking about, right? So we knew how to do that. We had to communicate and what was going to happen, and what was happening next, and how we saw things. And then we have meetings, Zoom meetings with different groups that are at different clients, and different leadership teams within the company, explaining to them what's going on and just keeping in touch, right? So at the beginning,
Mm.
you have a way of keeping in touch, is that you go visit them or you go do something that stopped, and then you're like, okay, what do I do? Well, you have to do Zoom meetings and take that over. And that sounds really simple, but that was a real cultural shift, and different and hard to do at the beginning. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but like at the beginning, when even when with a friend doing the Zooms, it was kind of really awkward. Now you Zoom onto somebody and it's like, hey, we're having a party. It's like we're doing a, you know, right? But at the beginning, it was like you were really like, oh my God, like, okay, we're focused, we're done. The meeting lasted, it was supposed to last half an hour, it lasted 10 minutes, right? Kind of thing. But now things have loosened up and people are more used to it on both sides, and are much more productive, I think.
Maybe we don't get as sort of tense and feel like we're on a recording or so, like I think there's that Zoom fatigue. I mean, Zoom fatigue is still real, but maybe we're used to being the fact that we're on video and figuring that out. I know you had mentioned empathy being really big. We'd
Yeah.
had some discussion around that. What do you both see? How's that in action? A lot of people are not doing well, right? They're
Yeah.
really not.
So you mentioned something, the women working, right? So we have a lot of scenarios, right? We have,
Yeah, or mothers in particular. Sorry, I should have specified. Yeah, thank you. That's a good point.
sometimes
Yep.
there's single mothers who are the primary breadwinner and have the kids at home. Think of that
Yep.
scenario, right? So you have that
Yep.
scenario.
Yep.
You have mothers that are the primary breadwinners. They're at home. The husband helps. Primary breadwinner mothers that are home, husband does not help scenario, right? And then, just, okay, maybe, the husband is a primary breadwinner, and the wife helps out. I mean, so you have so many different scenarios. You really have to understand what they have going on. There's people that have elderly people at home, that have disabled people at home. You kind of need to know your people and how to be more empathetic and kinder and patient with them when they're going through these things that you don't go through, so that so they are cared for. You got to care for your team, for your people, that are, essentially the company. So you do have to be very aware of what's going on, and not assume that everybody is in the same boat or cookie cutter. It's very difficult for mothers that work. I mean, that's the hardest thing, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. How have you seen empathy play out, or what is this? What do you think, Michelle? What about that idea? We're hearing a lot about it.
Yeah, I mean, when you originally asked the question, sort of what does it take from a leader right now, my first thought was to be a really good human. Like, we have to, this is about sort of the humanity
Mm.
side of things. And I think it starts with us being empathetic and giving that sort of human check in to ourselves. Because as leaders, in order to really be there for our teams, inspire and motivate, work through the challenges with them, we have to have that, full glass to be able to, pour from onto others.
Yeah.
And so I think there's like a heightened level of self-awareness that's needed right now around checking in, where are you right now with your energy level, to make sure that then you can, show up as a leader for your team. And I think we have to be really human with each other and just talk about that more. I have had moments with my team. We have a standing call every Friday, and something might have happened, I don't know, with a family matter or something. And you know what? We're going to need to reschedule this. This is a commitment we have to each other. And at the same time, I need to be in a place where I'm, ready to be as present as I can. And something else is, happening at this moment. And so being able to articulate that as a leader, I think, is very important. And then also being able to receive that from your team and checking in and pulse checking. Hey, I noticed that you haven't taken any of your days off recently. Let's make sure that you do that. And
Yeah.
checking in on all aspects of them as a human.
Yeah. I mean, it's a concern, right? Sort of what, I don't know if people are saving up or feel like they can't take their days off, that they feel like they'll be punished or something somehow. But I think we all, self-care is really important, and thinking about our team and empathy and how do we be a good human. And boy, doesn't this make leading is more of a challenge, because you have to be looking out, regardless of whether you're formally leading or not. It means you have to be looking out for others. And for you to be able to do that, you have to be in an okay place, right? So, I mean, self-care, right? And meaning sort of mindfulness and do like what, however, all of the various ways that plays out, boy, is that important now, right? I don't think one of the uh, friends of the center, I'll say, who has facilitated some sessions for us, who specializes in mindfulness. She said, I've never received this many calls. She's like, I'm getting calls every day, and from companies and leaders who have never thought about this before, or have always said, whatever. And all of a sudden now they're recognizing they need it and their teams need it, because we're sort of all kind of wrestling with the fact that we have this, that we need to be taking care of ourselves, and we sort of have this collision of work. I also wonder, will it be okay a few years from now for people to actually talk about non-work things, especially in the United States, right? That we've sort of gone away from almost all talk about non-work thing. So many people are so guarded, and so there's many leaders who don't know anything about their employees, their personal, like, we don't sort of have that connection. So I wonder, will this be a benefit? Maybe this is a good thing, right? Maybe this is a good thing, that we actually know what motivates our team better. We know what they're sticking, we know what they're struggling with. And it doesn't mean you have to be in their business, but there's sort of this recognition that, like, you're bringing your whole self to work, right? Like, you bring your whole person to work, and we can't just sort of segment in this way that we've been doing, or that, and a lot of companies have sort of been espousing for a while. So thank you both for this. So I want to, we're sort of marching toward the end here of our time. I want to ask you a question of, what are you hopeful for? So we've been talking about some of the challenges. Oh, it's hard. Like, what are you hopeful for? What are you excited for in the future?
I think one thing is, I do believe that we're very close to a vaccine and to better therapeutics. I mean, it's evident, right? It's not 4 years away. We know that, right? So they're in the last phases of trials. If several of the companies are. If anything would have gone really wrong, we would know about it instantaneously. The whole planet would. So at least we know that it's not killing people, things like that, right? So we know that. So I think the thing is pretty stable, because if not, we would know. And we're very close to getting that released. And the therapeutics are definitely better. Just from my conversations with my friends that are, administrators in hospitals and doctors and things like that. It's people that, a few months ago would have gone in their 90s and would have died for sure, or coming out of the hospital, things like that are happening. So that's better. I think when that turns around, I think there's going to be a pent up demand, and you could see it, as soon as you just say, hey, the restaurants are halfway open, everybody's out. So there's a pent up demand that I think will go up like a hockey stick when and it'll map to the vaccinations. It'll, kind of thing. So we are looking forward to that, and we think it's sooner rather than later. It's not 2 years away. It's probably sometime, early next year, or sometime during the year.
What are you excited about, Michelle, for the future, and are hopeful for?
Yeah, so 2 words come to mind. One is gratitude. And I think that I personally have seen a lot of folks around me take stock of the things that maybe we took for granted before, even being able to go to a restaurant, traveling. And so I think there's going to be a lot more gratitude when we get back to quote unquote normal. But I think the other one is creativity, is that in these more dire moments, it pushes us to confront problems and find more creative solutions. And I think there will be various books that we will read decades from now, and stories and docu-series about so-and-so founder came up with this solution during COVID because they felt deeply felt the reality of specific problems. And I think the problems that we're facing now are feel a lot more existential, right? Around our health, around, the future of our economy, around the environment. And we're having to confront those head on in a way that maybe we didn't before. And I think especially entrepreneurs I've seen, and, tech folks get really creative in those moments. So I'm hopeful and excited to see what comes from that.
That's awesome. Well, Sweta, Trina, Joel, Scarlett, Jennifer, Mike, Daniela, Ariana, Leo or Polo, Patricia, Leon, Shelley, Wellington. We have had great comments. We've had great questions from folks, and thank you for populating the chat and submitting your questions ahead of time. One of the changes that happened for us, we weren't doing this before, and in April, we thought, how do we stay connected with folks? And what a great opportunity that this Leading Well series has been. And it's been fun, and it's been engaging and informative to just talk to people who we have in our orbit at the center who are doing amazing things. And I appreciate both of you. So I just want to say thank you for being here with us today. And I appreciate your wisdom and your insights and your perspective, and also the work that you do. You are both, building great things and helping the ecosystems of your respective communities become even better in what they do. And I'm grateful that we get a chance to have these conversations, and I'm grateful for people like you. So for those of you who this was your first time showing up to Leading Well, we're glad that you were here, and please stay connected with us at #LeadFIU or Center for Leadership at FIU on LinkedIn. You can find us in all of the channels, of course. Next week, I'm excited to have a leadership lecture, a really special lecture with the former CEO of Dun & Bradstreet, which is a Fortune 500 company, Fortune 500 firm. Sarah Matthew, who's just a fantastic individual, and she'll be sharing with us some of her perspective and some of her challenges and kind of what she's going through. It's not going to be a typical lecture. It will be a mix of between a lecture and kind of like what we're doing here. So we're going to, again, these are opportunities we didn't have before. So Michelle and Peter, you are awesome people. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you to all of the fantastic participants who are here with us today. We wish you all a great rest of your day, and lead well and stay connected with us in the future.